Hi, this is Carrie Dell. I'm here with Steve Ulfelder, and we are going to talk about the book that he recently sold. And what is your publication date, or do you have a publication date?
It is scheduled to be May 2011.
Okay.
However, I've been warned not to tell people that that's firm because these things do get shifted around, especially for rookies like me. It's with St. Martin's Press, specifically with their Minotaur division.
Tell me about Conway Sax. Who is he, and why did you want to write about him?
Conway Sax is a guy originally from Minnesota, long-time guy who was a hopeless alcoholic and drug addict for a long time. Finally sort of bootstrapped his way out of that 10 to 15 years ago. And along his way to getting sober in Framingham, Massachusetts, which is sort of a gritty, down at the heels small city, halfway between Boston and Worcester, Massachusetts. Anyway, Conway found himself in Framingham, Massachusetts, and he, in the course of checking out various Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, found himself at this particular meeting held by a group called the Barn Burners in Framingham. And something about that group clicked with him, and what clicked with him actually was that it's this sort of hardcore group of, that's somewhere between a biker gang and a traditional AA meeting. They take things very seriously. And they get a lot of people who are sort of desperate joining up, and they need somebody who can be an enforcer and a fixer, a guy who can fix things up with bookies, a guy who can break people's arms if he needs to. And Conway fits the bill there, and he has been with this group ever since. So he's a guy with, he's an amateur sleuth, essentially, noir style, who has his cases delivered to him in the form of drunks with serious problems. Conway was a talented NASCAR driver following in his father's footsteps. He's raced at small tracks around Massachusetts and New England for many years, and he was in NASCAR's Busch Cup, which is now called the Nationwide Series, which is sort of the equivalent of AAA baseball. Now, this is going back, say, 15 years, and he looked like he was ready to take that final step up to Sprint Cup, which is NASCAR's big-time series. At the time, it was called Winston Cup. But the booze and the drugs got him, and he fell all the way down. He lost his wife, he lost his son, he lost his ride, and so on and so forth.
So, which came first? Did you want to write about an alcoholic who was a race car driver, or did you want to write a race car driver who wasn't on the tour anymore and the alcohol and the drugs was a way to get him out of there?
I'd say the alcohol came first. What sort of inspired the whole thing was this particular AA meeting that I was going to at the time, which sort of served as the inspiration for the Barn Burners. My AA group obviously doesn't go around breaking people's legs or beating up bookies or anything, but that was sort of, my imagination took off from there. So that was the key thing to me, because I thought it was such a cool way to get this amateur detective involved with cases. And the race car stuff was sort of secondary. It was just something that seemed to fit. As you mentioned a little bit, I've been racing for close to 20 years myself. And in fact, my day job, I co-own a company called Flat Out Motorsports that builds race cars. So that was a pretty natural fit.
So, how did you acquire your literary agent?
Well, let's see. I wrote the first Conway Sax novel, I wrote the first Conway Sax novel in 2007, and I essentially did what people do. I started sending out queries to primarily agents, but also to a couple of small publishers. And I had what I thought at the time was the world's luckiest day in July 2007. I got a phone call from a small publisher here in Boston who wanted to publish the book. called Shotgun Lullaby. So this guy calls offering to buy the book, and when I hang up the phone, I go over and check my email, and it was Janet Reed wanting to see the full manuscript of the book. And of course, the fantastic Janet would become my agent. Now, I thought I was all set there, but unfortunately, that small publisher wound up slowly going out of business over the next year. Fortunately, before any actual contracts were signed, so I never tied anything up with him. But so there I was. I thought I had a book deal. I didn't have a book deal, but I did have Janet Reed as my agent, and I think in the long run that's a lot more valuable than a book deal with a sketchy, perpetually on the edge of going out of business publisher.
You started out as a journalist. Do you think most journalists at some point want to write a novel, or is that just my perception?
Yeah, I think that's a very common thing. I think when you're a journalist, you face this constant grind of short turnaround deadlines, and journalists develop this daydream of sort of sitting in the study, smoking their pipe and taking their time to write the great American novel. So yeah, I think that's a pretty common daydream among journalists. As long as I was a working journalist, there was no way I was going to write a novel, because you write all day. I don't care what you're writing, but if you're cranking out work all day and getting paid for it, I know for me, and I know for a lot of my journalist friends, it's very difficult to then come home, take off your journalist hat and put on your novelist hat and write again into the wee hours. Plenty of journalists do it, and God bless them, but that didn't work for me. I never really got productive on the novels until I left journalism and started focusing on the race car company.
So do you think the background in journalism gave you a little bit of a head start with discipline or craft?
Yeah, I think it does in a couple of ways. One is, yes, craft. Simply, the repetition, the idea of starting something, finishing it, working productively. The other thing that comes in handy when you're a journalist is that you quickly learn that your prose is not brilliant, undying art that cannot be touched. You learn to take edits pretty well, or else you don't last in that field.
Any hints, anything you wish you had known when you started the whole process?
There's so much good advice out there between reading agent blogs, editor blogs, all the great websites that are available. I guess my advice is to pay attention to all that advice, heed it. It's the conventional wisdom is conventional wisdom for a reason. To do all that stuff, I guess the thing I wish I had done differently is I wish I had stuck with it the first time around. I actually wrote my first very bad novel almost 20 years ago, which was in the pre-World Wide Web days. I mean, there was email, but there wasn't any real World Wide Web. So what do you do back then if you write a bad novel and you don't know what to do with it? I sent it out to an agent or two and didn't hear anything back, and then I went 15 years without even trying to write another one. Well, had I persisted, I might have a bunch of books under my belt. So I guess pay attention to the conventional wisdom